5 here or whatever.
Did you take spring break off?
No, I had to work.
Oh, did you?
Yeah.
So, would you make the kids just sit in the backyard?
We had to buy a couple of extra rolls of duct tape. No, Allison was off.
Oh.
Yeah. Exactly. Yeah.
Oh, it's a huge big redo on here, so I'm just going to try and just Dwayne, I think. I'm not sure who else.
I know, don't they?
Where's Sandra?
No. I haven't read it. I did. Oh, did they?
Folks, don't be afraid to grab a chair around and fill in the spots. Don't be standing around. That's lots of room.
Yeah, I will.
And more chairs in the back if we have to yank them there for the time being.
I would like it.
Are you bringing presents around?
This is for when we get into one of our planning items. He just wanted
Oh.
to distribute them.
Okay. Just keep it down there for the moment.
Uh-huh. Oh. It may taste like it too.
And we're going to have a presentation for
Yeah.
Colwood, yes.
Were you feeling a little sleepy there in the dark? Yeah. Yeah. All right. I have
On FAC, the Charlotte Press. Oh, it's still here? Oh,
Yep.
good. Great.
Yep.
Okay. Great. All right. I'll leave that for you then, Flo.
Okay, ladies and gentlemen, we are just marginally past the 7 o'clock mark there on the clock. So I would like to resume the regular meeting of council on March the 24th here at 7:02. We have done a bit of a juggling, folks, on our agenda because we have such a large populace of students from John Stubbs that we are here to recognize tonight. So in our approval of the agenda, council, it was given to you at your desktops that reorganize the manner in which we'll be doing things this evening. Do you want me to read each and one of them out, or are we prepared to just go on the amended agenda? And I'd like to look for approval on that then.
So moved.
All those in favor? Opposed? Motion carried. So with that, we will start with our Pay It Forward presentation and the students of John Stubbs School. So, Monsieur Laurie, if you could come forward with your students. And we're here this evening to present to the grade 5 class of John Stubbs a recognition on behalf of the City of Colwood and members of council for your work and dedication in making things beautiful in in Colwood against our counterparts in the Greater Victoria area. You did a phenomenal job in your project of flower count, and you took us to the top of the rankings. So on behalf of all of our council, I want to say thank you very much. And is there anybody that counted the most flowers in the class? Aha!
Do you guys feel like media stars?
Yeah.
Tulips!
All right. And students would like to shake members of council's hands, so if you would allow them the privilege of coming through, I'll just stand over here and start, and you guys can just go right through, okay?
Which way?
Which way you're going?
Where do you want to?
Oh.
Oh, I see. Thanks for doing that. I appreciate it.
Thank you.
Thank you. Great job.
Thank you.
Great job. Great job.
Hi guys. Hey. And confirm my
Thank you.
Did and for this the kids doing what they did. I think there were more panels here than the Very proud parents. Yeah, you're on zealous drive, and you definitely showed a lot of zealous behavior in being out counting. We're going to use you guys as the example next year for teachers all across the area to teach them how to do the counting. So you may have some slip competition. Anyway, Your Honor, I'd like to just give you this from flower count, just denoting the fact that you did manage to become the bloomingest city
Thanks, guys.
Maybe they get a special.
Well, maybe we get them a flower. You girls want a flower? There you go. Take a flower. Great. Thanks, girls. That's great. Now, where did I lose my pen? Are we going to close up the curtains, make it a little more homey?
That's wonderful.
We need to find a way to keep them.
Yeah.
Michael's here, okay. So now that we've allowed them a few minutes to escape on us, I would like to move to the next item on our agenda, which out of order is the presentation by Mr. Hicks and the CRD Draft Regional Transportation Plan. Michael, you had an intro to provide?
Yeah, I just wanted to introduce John Hicks, the Senior Transportation Planner with the CRD, and say that I believe that the CRD is looking for any feedback that Council would like to give, and John will explain the deadline on that. And staff have looked at the plan and are reasonably happy with it, but feel that Council may wish to think particularly about the governance part of the presentation and of the plan. Thank you.
Thank you. John?
Thank you, Michael. Good evening, Mayor and Council. Thank you for the opportunity to come and speak about the draft regional transportation plan this evening. I'd also like to acknowledge and thank the work provided on behalf of the city from Michael and in particular Emmett McCusker, who's been part of the Technical Advisory Committee throughout this whole process. His work has been greatly appreciated. I'll just go over a quick presentation basically as to where we are and how we got here. Essentially, the process stemmed from the discussion that the jurisdictional control over all the various ranges of transportation is very mode-specific, and a lot held in, so, for example, municipal, provincial, and Crown Corporation entities such as BC Transit. We are all working towards the same targets and trying to improve the mode share, the splits, and the greenhouse gas emissions. And it was basically a strong direction from the board, CRD board, to move forward with a regional type of concept towards improving the infrastructure in terms of transportation. As mentioned, there's a myriad of plans out there focusing on mode-specific areas. Just a couple are listed up there, such as Transit Future Plan, Pedestrian Cycling Master Plan, highway and corridor plans across the region. The work which was done has basically stemmed from the work which was actually it's building on upon work which is done in such plans as those outlined above, and also corridor plans done through the previous ones, travel choices, all these plans which have been done at a local and a regional level over time, and saying, okay, all these plans are great, but how do we get these to move forward? What traction do we move? So with that, we've taken the vision, which is a future where transportation is sustainable, offers choice, enables smart growth, and makes livable communities possible. That's come from essentially the plans which are already in place. A very quick rundown of the participation process. As you can see up there, as we've gone through quite a lengthy process through committees within the CRD. Steering committee was made up of members of MOTI and of CRD. It was a jointly funded process between those two. RTP TAC, each of the municipalities had representation on the TAC, or the Technical Advisory Committee, which sat down and looked to make sure that the interests and the plans aligned with the overall local municipal plans. It also had representation from areas such as Island Trust, BC Transit, and MOTI again, making sure all the key players were involved. A very quick engagement process. Basically, the plan started around February 2012 at the direction of the board. May 2013 was another key date where we took a draft through to the Council of Forums, Forum of Council, where the representative members could actually have a voice and look through the information and say what they felt needed to be updated. With that information, we then went back and updated the report accordingly, and that was then taken to the board, to the Committee of the Whole in October 2013. At that stage, we were asked to move forward to a referral process to the municipalities, and that's a process that we're currently in at this stage. The intent is to move forward with an updated report to the board for consideration for endorsement in May this year. There are 5 key themes which are identified very clearly within the report. Integrating transportation and land use. We're working very closely in alignment with the regional sustainability strategy. Creating exceptional environments for walking and cycling. Taking transit to the next level. Getting out the most of our roads and trails. And influencing travel behaviour. So building upon what we have, we know there's a lot of great infrastructure, a lot of great programs going across the region. How can we build upon those? Not necessarily reinventing the wheel, but moving forward with what we can. There's 14 priority actions out of a total of 50. Those priority actions include a lot of the things which are probably the biggest questions of debate, I guess, around governance, funding, the role of transit. All of those areas have been identified as areas that we realise need to be corrected, but that requires a process in itself, or identified, not corrected, should I say. They're the areas that we need to work on as a group, collaboratively, and to see the best options that we can possibly come up with. One of the key proposals under the plan is identifying a regional multimodal network. In other words, a series of road networks and trail networks which would identify as regional priorities, which would connect the municipalities and the electoral areas into each other. Those networks have been come off largely off OCPs and transportation plans within the region and the municipalities, and of course the electoral areas as well. This is one of the key pieces to this. This is where regional funding would be directed towards these key corridors. Colwood specific, I'm sorry that looks a little blurry up there. It's basically a summary of the Colwood plan itself as to which major roads would be included, which parts of the trail. We realise that Colwood plays an important role on the road and importantly the trail network as well, and that there's been a significant movement forward towards looking at that active transportation component and building transit. The City of Colwood Transportation Master Plan has come at a fantastic time. It's a time where this collaborative process has already been building up. We've been working closely with city staff on that plan itself, attending meetings, providing assistance in their stakeholder group. We've been providing, sharing data, not us providing data. We've been sharing data of what we have, and Colwood's been sharing data that they have to make sure that the models that we have get the best possible realistic picture of what's actually on the road, and we can make our projections based off those. So it's been a very, very good learning curve at such an important time of this process. The Potential Transportation Committee and Working Group structure. There was a report done in 2012, I believe, for the basically looking at the governance review. It was aimed largely in terms of transit at that stage, but obviously that transportation scope and the process can be aligned to a broader concept, a broader authority. So as you can see, there's sub-regional groups. The sub-regional groups are identifying the fact that sub-regional areas such as the West Shore, the Peninsula, the core, the electoral areas, or particularly the islands, have common requirements, or common needs, common linkages, and often that their service centres are intrinsically linked, and to separate them in some ways would be very, very difficult to do. So it would then lead into what we would have, that Transportation Advisory Committee, or that technical group, which would be representatives from each of the staff municipalities. They would be the people in the position making recommendations to a standing committee, which would basically be identifying the criteria, the level of service, the standards, those type of key priorities, and the recommendations for funding, which would go up based on the criteria set to determine what the priorities are within the region in terms of transportation. That voice would then be taken through the recommendation and then go onto the board under this particular model. The partners that we mentioned before, there's partnership roles for the CRD. The municipalities would each have representation. The electoral areas, BC Transit, importantly, has a key role. They took a key part in this actual plan. Just to make that very clear, the Transit Future Plan is actually nested within this plan itself. So the corridors identified in the Transit Future Plan are actually nested within the corridors that you saw on the regional multimodal network. And of course, the Ministry of Transportation and Infrastructure. Comes back, obviously, the questions around funding is a very significant issue. One key part would be consolidating the existing resources and infrastructure and programs which are actually undertaken in the CRD itself, looking at consolidating things such as the parks, the regional transportation function, the regional information service, our docks, our electoral area transit into one consolidated authority. Once you have an authority, it also allows those things such as capital requirements. You can, build assets. You can actually own assets or have control of assets, which then enables better eligibility for some federal grants, in particular. Pooled 50% of municipal EA, the regional gas funds. So there's a grants-based process, which is the GSPF, and then there's a regional-based gas tax process, which is the RSPF. Pooling those funds, looking at the legislative requirements and the actual bylaw requirements behind those. Senior government capital, leveraged by TAC. It's become very clear over time that there's a big push to make sure that whenever a federal grant's been provided in particular, there's a matching partnership. There seems to be pushing more heavily towards that. And if we can speak as one regional voice towards obtaining those grants, it's felt that will give us probably a good step up as opposed to 3 or 4 municipalities vying for the one grant on different parts of the same network. In-kind staff time of partners, as I mentioned before, the great work which the engineering staff from Colwood have been working with this, and we're doing that across the whole region. That in itself built upon the expertise of a lot of people. A lot of people have a huge amount of expertise, which have been very beneficial. And existing capital budgets and community works contributions. So tying into the work that councils are already doing as part of their capital plans, if we see that you're focusing on a priority corridor, and tying in some of that regional funding, if it's on that multimodal network, to build up that reserve and then to increase the possibility of getting matching grants. This is just a very quick diagram. I won't run through it. It's just the intent is to show that even if we just were to stay at the status quo, we could still move forward with a percentage of the actions that we have identified in the transportation plan. However, as you can see, as you come down, with a change in authority and a change in direction and that stronger collaboration between partners, there's potential to actually achieve all of those over time. Keeping in mind it's a 25-year plan and priorities would have to be established as part of the process. And basically, a very quick summary as to what the plan is as a cornerstones of the summary. Establishment of an expanded transportation service authority and new funding model. Establishment of an ongoing transportation advisory committee. Creation of performance-based metrics to inform decision-making, so we can measure in advance and post-implementation of construction or infrastructure to see if they have worked the way we had anticipated. And adoption of the regional multimodal network and mobility hubs. Adoption of mobility hubs. Mobility hubs are identified centres which have basically come off the OCPs in consultation with planning and engineering staff, and also through the process of the RSS. Where we are at the moment, basically January to March, we're out doing our rounds for consultation with the individual municipalities, and in April we will update the report. We have a Transportation Select Committee, I believe, on the 23rd of April scheduled, where we'll give some introduction back onto whether the process sits, and then move forward ideally with a board endorsement proposal in May of this year. Very quick summary.
That was a quick overview. I know we gave you a limited amount of time, so thank you. Members of council, questions for Mr. Hicks?
Thank you. Through the chair, first of all, very much appreciate you coming to do this, and also appreciate your working with our staff on our transportation master plan. I gather that's been a good relationship and appreciated on both sides. Couple of comments, and I'm going to get sort of general and then a couple of Colwood specific ones. I get frustrated when we focus on, the cars, the buses, the bikes, the pedestrians, and we forget about things like wheelchairs, and we forget about things like segways and skateboards, all of which form also legitimate ways of getting around. Have they been considered in the plan? And I do realise it's a regional transportation plan, and those tend to be shorter distance trips, but it's still an important piece of that network.
To be honest, they haven't been directly considered. However, within the guidelines, for example, of the trails, they're considered within the guidelines of the trails with the length and the width of the trail pathways, but they haven't been considered as a separate component.
Okay. And second comment, and I'm going to sound like a broken record because I know I've said this at least 3 times before. When I look at the map of Colwood, what I don't see identified on the map are a couple of regionally, nationally significant locations. Fort Rod Hill Fiskard Lighthouse is missing off the map. They would desperately love to be on a transit system. If we don't put that up there on the wish list, ain't never going to happen. Royal Roads University has been doing some work with transit to get in there, so that's somewhat covered, but I think it deserves recognition as an activity hub. And the other piece that I don't see on the plan, and I realize it's a wish list item, but that's the notion of a ferry from the Royal Bay Area to downtown. May not happen for a long time, but again, I think it's an important piece of recognizing what could be possible in the future. So speaking for myself, those are things I would love to see the transportation plan address. Just coming very quickly to the governance model, and I'm going to let others speak to it in much more detail, but there's a challenge with sort of the CRD as the body, in that there are kind of some very important folks who are then not of a necessity at the table, and MOTI and BC Transit certainly come to mind in that one. And I'm seeing you making a face at me because you.
Sorry.
So you're saying you're disagreeing.
There's definitely the intent is for MOTI and BC Transit to play a role. The role with transit is being discussed as we speak. We met with transit on Friday, and the role with MOTI would definitely be as a key partner. So they'd be helping us determine the standards and part of the corridors, but it still comes down to that relationship.
Thank you.
Councillor Day?
Thanks. Thanks for the great presentation as well, and for coming out to us to get the feedback. One of the biggest issues with trying to do the whole monster, if you will, the whole octopus, that is the Capital Regional District all at one time, is that rightly or wrongly we're perceived as competing with one another for budget, for attention, and I'm concerned with the working group structure that the various local perspectives are then going to go through the Transportation Standing Committee and Advisory Committee before it even comes to the board. The regional interests may be already shuffled before the cards are even played at the table. So that's a concern for me. And one of my big concerns is that scooters, wheelchairs, walkers do not have equal opportunity within the Capital Regional District, and that I realize that we can't always make everything accessible instantaneously, but certainly we have to have hubs that are navigable by those, and every municipality is going to have a certain amount of deficit in their infrastructure, because whether you already built it and it's broken down because you're 100 years old, or if you just established that neighborhood 20 years ago and you didn't think of that at the time, you still have the same problem of lacking any real source of easily accessible funding, and needing to put that infrastructure on the ground. So Colwood belongs to, and in fact began, the Intermunicipal Advisory Committee on Disability Issues, where I acti, and I work quite closely with that committee and have done for the last 8-9 years. And I do quite a lot of traveling throughout the region, with people with disabilities of different types. And there's a real need to make those areas accessible. And I think that has to be one of our strongest priorities. And we've had a fabulous partnership with CRD Parks. So there's been some really great uptake. So I want to, commend you, as well as say, I'm a little bit worried about the structure, and just because people tend, actually one of our own staff said it to me when we were doing a mapping workshop to do with IACTI of Colwood. And our own staff said to me, it's great, I look at these maps all the time, but I've never actually been out on the ground surveying what the actual conditions are. So it's very difficult to get people out of their office and, walking down the road to check it out. So I think that's why we have to put an importance on getting the local representation's voice directly to the decision-making table. So I'll leave it at that.
Thank you.
Anyone else this time? A move receipt motion, is that what we have no recommendations on this one?
We were hoping. Yeah. We're just going to invite council to make a comment if they choose by the 4th of April.
Okay, I think I could probably have it circulated around if we can be a bit more formal in our concerns on this report, and then we'll forward that through to yourself, John.
Thank you.
Okay. So a motion to respond for April 4th, then? Councillor Lucan, seconder? Second. All those in favor? Opposed? Motion carried. Thank you, John.
Thank you very much for your time.
Moving on to my new agenda, item 4, public participation. This is a time for any of the members in our audience that have anything in particular to address council with. It's your opportunity to step forward and make your comments. Questions? Statements? You can't hide way back there, I see you. And seeing none, then I will expect you're here for other parts. This is the opportunity that you have if there's anything on the agenda that you want to talk to. So just wanting to make sure I give you plenty of opportunity. Seeing none, I will move forward then into the mayor's message, and I have a number of sort of announcements and whatever, but I would like to start off by saying that there was in the paper recently notation that Colwood is seeking to go their own way in the way of sewage treatment. And what the CRD has endorsed is the opportunity for us to explore and look at what that would look like and what that might be like. So we are presently in the very early stages of creating the opportunity for the members of our public to weigh in on that and for us to be able to give them information. So look to your mailboxes, newspapers, online, at the Colwood website for further information, because it will be coming at you fast and furious as we get things underway. So just wanted to make that comment out there to everybody. I also have reminders. We have a showcase of arts with the Wanda Fuca 55 Plus Center on Saturday and Sunday, April 12th and 13th. Those ones are. It's also Daffodil Month with the BC Cancer Association, and also National Organ and Tissue Donor Awareness Month in April. I'm sporting the pink jersey tonight in honor of our Victoria Grizzlies, who have been participating in the Cancer Foundation fundraiser of last month, March, but also in recognition of their hard-fought wins and their next stage in their championship playdowns. So they have home games March the 28th and April 3rd. I've been in attendance to some of the last series of playoff games, and boy, that's some pretty hard played hockey. Keeping in mind that these boys have had some adversity in their change of ownership and administration in there, and yet they've kept their sticks on the ice and their feet in the game, and it's been remarkable hockey to watch. So for the $15, it's well worth it. So, and I've got one of my neighbor friends is one of the rookie members of the team, so he's been one of their scoring leaders over the last few games, so way to go, Cole. And I think that's it on my agenda of notes. I've got a couple of invites here that maybe I'll bring up to council at this point. There is a candlelight tribute April 9th at the Royal Canadian Legion through the Royal Canadian Legion, Veterans Memorial Park on Wednesday the 9th at 7:45, and I'm looking for somebody that might be able to attend that event. So if one of you can fit that in, please see me. There's also an opportunity here through the Belmont Musicals Theatre. They have an upcoming performance, The Wizard of Oz, on Thursday, the April 3rd, or again April 4th or 5th. The director of this production, Melissa Young, has extended the invitation to go. We just have to connect with her. So if there's somebody that would like to attend this on behalf of council, again, I have the ticket information here with that. But again, these folks do a wonderful job in their presentations, and this one will be at the Spectrum Theatre at Spectrum High School. So if you can let me know on those ones, and I think that's all that I have for you all tonight. So thank you very much, and I will move forward on the next agenda item. Adoption of the minutes, and we did have a correction circulated in the minutes, so it would be as corrected.
I'll move adoption as amended.
Second.
All those in favor? Opposed? Motion carried. Item number 7, item requiring council decision. Now I have to go into mine to find out where we are.
I think we have
This
one
is-
to receive yet.
Oh, wait a minute.
5.2.
So I would move that we receive items 5.21 through 5, minutes
Well,
of
that's,
the committee meeting.
there we are. All those in favor? Opposed? Motion carried. Presentation we've done on this one. We are now correspondence. I have nothing on that one, so there's been no change on that one, folks.
What's agenda item number 7?
Yeah, but it's still blank
Yeah.
in there.
Good.
So it's blank all the way through.
Okay.
Nothing got added in. Moving then into number 8, because we're trying to expedite staff attendance and that sort of thing. So we are actually item 9 in our electronic version, pages 113 to 119. So if we can move to that, the header on it, when I get there, is bylaw number 1534, final reading of the 5-year financial plan.
Madam Mayor, through you to the CAO, I believe I need to declare a conflict of interest due to my position on CREST. Is that right? So I will so declare.
Thanks, sir. Any others? And we did have that declaration put in there, just as a reminder, in our packages, folks, for us to be considering things when this sort of thing happens, due to the legal position of the incident over on Salt Spring Island, and that is yet to be resolved in the courts with the province and whatever, so we have to adhere to that side of caution. Councillor Day?
Sorry, I'm confused where we were on the agenda, but if we are at the 5-year plan bylaw. I believe that because, is West Shore Parks and Rec included in that or not? I don't remember.
The whole city is included in that budget bylaw.
So that would include West Shore Parks and Rec?
Through the chair to the CFO, my question is the West Shore Park and Rec item a pre-approved item, or is this to be approved tonight? I think that'll be a determining question.
The West Shore Park and Recreation budget came forward quite some time ago, and it's included as a separate requisition within the administration budget.
Mm-hmm.
I believe that we will, both Councillor Day and myself will need to declare a potential conflict because Mike Hicks has specifically left the board because he was not able to vote on budgets.
Yeah.
So I believe that there is sort of a thing. So I will be declaring a conflict and leaving as well.
Likewise.
So we'll give you that moment.
Everybody's confused in the audience. They're looking, we're slowly disintegrating.
It's a very awkward situation that many councils throughout the province are finding themselves because of the result of this decision. And we're fortunate that, we have citizen members on some of those boards that can take the pressure off on things and that we still maintain quorum when we're in a situation of budget because of this. So as long as everybody's in attendance. So I will call then the question, seeing that we have no further declaration.
So have we moved final?
I will move it and somebody will shake it.
I'll second it.
Okay, so with that, all those in favor? Opposed? Motion carried. Just going to grab those other folks in. Thank you. New business, which will now put us, folks, backwards in our agenda. Let me get back into the electronic one here. New business starting with item number 8.1 under Finance and Admin. Memorandum, Chief Building Inspector regarding 2997 Charlotte, and notice on title Supplemental Information.
Madam Mayor, I'll defer to our Chief Building Inspector.
Flo?
To the Mayor and Council, first of all, I'd like to apologize for not being present at the March 10th Council meeting to respond to questions from the owner. At the direction of Council, during that meeting, the owner was advised to work with staff to reach a solution that would be satisfactory to all parties. I did meet with the owner last Friday and had a very frank discussion with him about the issues as they were from the beginning of the project up until today. As it now stands, the permits are all in place. He has received a permit from VHA for the septic system. He has his valid renewed permit for the secondary suite, and the building and plumbing permits have been paid for. One of the issues that the owner had was in regards to the registration of the notice on title and what it would mean to his property in terms of his financial cost to have it, first of all, placed on title and then removed. And I assured him that the costs were minimal and they would be borne by the city. And he seemed to be quite more relaxed after that point in time. We did talk a lot about this requirement for duct-type smoke detection systems in in the code, and we went over the code, and I think I feel that he left with a sense of understanding that the code was very clear and concise as to, in his particular situation, this is what he would have to do. Unfortunately, had he involved the city earlier in the process, there may have been other choices that he could have made that would have been less expensive on his part. However, being the situation as it is, this is a situation that will resolve itself. He seemed to be acknowledged that he will be moving forward and contacting an electrical contractor to complete the work. I did mention to him that as soon as all the works are complete and we've inspected the parcel and issue an occupancy permit for the works, that the notice and title will be removed. As part of today's package, I included as a supplemental to the report that basically outlined the chronological order of events that occurred since we first had contact with the property owner. They're fairly lengthy. At the end, after reviewing them, it's apparent that the project stalled, and there was not a lot of motivation to keep it moving forward until the city initiated an action to file notice on title. So to that end, I would recommend to council that they proceed with filing notice on title and have it removed at such time as the work has been completed, inspected, and approved. Thank you.
Comments, questions from council? Councillor Lukens?
Thank you, Your Worship. Just through yourself to the Chief Building Inspector, is it typically the case that the city pays for the costs associated with placing notice and removing it?
Through the chair, Councillor Lukin, that has been the case in the past, albeit we have not, to this point in time, filed on notices on title. We have in the past gone through some legal action, which is considerably more costly than filing notice.
And what's the cost associated again, please?
Yeah, $24.
Okay.
$25.
To put notice on and to remove it, or is
Each.
it the total?
For each.
So
it's
$50.
$50 in total.
Thank you.
Actually, if I could just add to that through the mayor, there is also an additional charge of $25 to have a registry company. They come out, they pick up the information, they go to land titles, they file it all, and they send us back the document that's been stamped by land titles with a file registration number on it, and send that back to the city for the $25 fee.
So it would be $100
In total,
then
to put it on
over,
and to take it off and do the registry process, it would be a total of $100.
Okay, just to be clear, so council has that. Any other questions and comments? I'm glad that further conversation was had at the end of the week on top of this, and in that the owner is not in the building means, or at least indicates that he's satisfied with the direction and understands what's going on. So thank you, staff, for taking that extra time to do that. We have a recommendation before us. Can I have someone to move and second?
So moved.
Second.
Any further questions, comments? Call the question. All those in favor? Opposed? Motion carried. Thank you. Following item is item number 8.1.2, report building inspector again, 3168 Mitchosen Road, unsafe deck request for notice on title.
Your Worship, this is another request for a resolution of council to file Section 57 notice on title. Is a summary that there was a building permit that was issued for this home in 2011 to replace a very deteriorated deck. The old deck a permit was issued, the old deck was torn down, and a new deck was replaced up to the level of the deck only. There were no handrails that were installed at the time. Subsequently, we had gone back on 3 occasions and left messages and spoken with the owners about moving the project forward and ensuring that there was no access to the deck. In regards to the no access to the deck, we believe that that's not the case, as that there is a barbecue now situated on the deck, indicating to us that this area is being used, which could presumably put an occupant of the deck in harm's way should they fall off the edge or step off backwards or something of the like. At the highest point, the deck is approximately 2.5 meters above adjacent ground, so that if anybody should take a tumble off, there could be a potential for serious injuries. By filing a notice on title, it will again make prospective purchasers aware that there's remediation that is required on this property, and this notice and title will also limit the liability that the city may incur should an incident occur. I recommend to Mayor and Council that they pass a resolution to file a Section 57 notice on title.
I'll move the recommendation.
Councillor Logan?
Thank you, Your Worship. Through you to the Chief Building Inspector. Yeah, I'm just wondering, now, this is the second one in a row that we've seen, so I'm wondering, when does it become an incentive for people not to complete projects? When the city is going to be picking up the $24.20 charge to file a notice. I say that because this one scares me in particular because of the height of the deck and just the precedent that is set. And to have my concern too is that we could look at having a bunch of half-baked projects out there, not complete because the city's just going to pay the $24 to put a notice on title, and the next owners will just have to pay to finish the railing, that type of thing. And they have to sorry, maybe I see the Director of Administration.
I'd like to just add, though, filing the notice doesn't prevent them from still having to comply with the rules and regulations. What it does is protect the city for issues related to liability. It reduces our liability, as well as it protects future potential owners, like the woman we had a couple of weeks ago at council who purchased a property that was non-compliant, and now she's facing really hefty bills to bring her home into compliance. There was no notice on title, and there was nothing for her to be aware of these issues. So this helps to make people aware that a home that they may be looking to purchase has issues that have to be addressed.
So is there, just following up on that then, thank you, Pat, what type of time frame is there then to get these works completed?
Through Councillor Logan, through the Mayor. Well, ideally, we would like to have the works expedited as soon as possible. However, it's challenging to force somebody to do the work when they are claiming to have be in financial duress and unable to complete the works. It's a challenging situation, and I think what we're trying to do is to encourage them and help them move along in completing the project. In this particular situation, it would be very easy to bring the deck into compliance, let's call it, by installing something on the exterior of the house doors that would prevent somebody from leaving the house and entering onto the deck. In this particular case, there was not a desire by the owner to facilitate a solution at this time.
Okay, thank you.
Councillor Sullivan?
Thank you, through the chair. I think it's important for us to provide every opportunity for a homeowner to address our concerns. But this one seems to have gone on since 2011, and if this is a liability for our city, it's a liability that's been sitting on the books since then. So my question to staff is at what point in time do we put our foot down as a city, realizing that there is a strong likelihood of liability? And can you just help me understand what the process is and the timing around our processes are, and if we have any other liabilities out there that we ought to be dealing with?
Through the chair, we have a process in place whereby we review files periodically to look at the files that are expired or coming close to expiry and contact the property owners. We don't have a tracking mechanism in place that we would, on a monthly or 6-month basis, check up on the properties to do essentially a progress check. We rely on the homeowners or the property owners to continue in their endeavors. When the permits do expire, that's when the flags come up and we start to visit them. This one unfortunately fell under the radar somewhat, and through the attention of our CEO, it was brought back up into a focus. Excuse me. Generally, I think we are shifting in our attitudes now that if we're not having compliance, we are going to bring these issues forward to council much more quickly than we had in the past. My philosophy has been that if we have a willing participant or an owner that's moving forward and doing their best to achieve compliance, I'm going to work with them and help them get to where they need to be. When we get to situations where there's willful non-compliance, it suddenly becomes challenging for us to deal with.
Thank you. Through the chair, just a follow-up question then. Is this something that we need to maybe strengthen in our bylaws, or is it more of a process issue?
Through the chair, I would say that it's a process issue that we have to be more diligent in monitoring these situations that may cause injury to owners or occupants.
Thank you. I just encourage our CAO and to help us understand, I think, where some of those liabilities are, so that we as a council can perhaps deal with them before they become issues. So thank you.
Councillor Lukens?
Thank you. I concur wholeheartedly with Councillor Sullivan, but I would like to also support what Councillor Logan said. This one scares me as well because of the heights, but I don't believe it's a cost that our taxpayers should be incurring. Well, I think the city has every right to move on some of these things that are of concern for our city. I think that the homeowners in the end should be responsible for the cost, because we're having to put out the extra effort to ensure that our city is not made liable, and that's each and every taxpayer. So I would like to, add into the recommendation, whether it be another bullet, that the cost be borne by the homeowner. To be honest with you, it should be potentially in the bylaw, if there is a bylaw around that.
And could that be recovered at occupancy time or your final sign-off, Flo? As part of a
Your
fee
worship,
structure, if there's anything outstanding on there that it gets...
I'm not certain. I'd have to defer to our administrator to whether or not our fees and services bylaw would have to be amended to include the charging of these types of fees.
Mm-hmm. Through the chair, yes, that bylaw would need to be amended. Going back to process, I think we need to reiterate what our expectations are when we're providing these building permits and upon inspections and timing. Maybe it's through that process and through, a notice of a deficiency that, depending on the deficiency, of course, there's an allotted time that's provided that is reasonable and is mutually negotiated. If they fail to meet that expectation, then perhaps we automatically apply or go through this process, but with the intent to recover that entire fee.
So then staff will take that as a friendly direction. So we have the recommendation before us as it stands, and staff will take direction on the other one. Any further conversation? Call the question then. All those in favor? Opposed? Motion carries. Item 8.1.3, Occupational Health and Safety Report for 2013. That one's going to come from Councillor Martin.
Thank you. Unless...
I see no Trevor.
Yeah, there's... do you want me... I can speak I can speak to this. It's not a problem, but unless you guys have something more that you want to speak on to it. Okay. Trevor Davies basically provided his annual report on the occupational health and safety. I'm hoping you all had an opportunity to read the report. On page 93, sorry, I don't know what it is on iPad. You can just basically sort of see the cut fingers, pulled muscles, all that kind of stuff. None of that resulted in lost days of work, which was very good. So he continues to work on that. Page 5 of 8, or page 95 of 119, sick time stats. Basically, what was discussed at the was you can look at a couple specific areas, but it's very, very important to note that the data was skewed. There were a couple long-term disability or a long-term sickness, which skewed the data on a significant amount of the ones that were quite high. And obviously our goal is to continue to try and hopefully be below the BC average in lost work days. And Trevor, with our CAO, will continue to work on that. And then just review of some of the 2013 goals and the goals for 2014. And I guess the only main thing that stood out for me as well was sort of a celebration of the City Watch program. No, that's not in this one. I'm sorry. So that's there. Happy to answer any questions. We talked in depth about it, so if anybody has any, I'm happy to address it. But it's just recommended that the current, and I will move this, that the current occupational health and safety program and its initiatives be continued as it is achieving positive results in overall health and safety in the workplace.
Seconder?
Second.
Conversation, discussion, Councillor Day?
Thanks. I just wanted to add the comment that there's been a tremendous amount of work done by Trevor Davies, as well as the whole occupational health and safety group, of which there's a number of staff that have worked on that. And they're working very hard to improve the culture in Colwood, to improve, as in have less absenteeism, which I think is an excellent initiative, and they really have documented it very well so that we can move forward. So I appreciate all the work.
Thank you. Any others? Call the question. All those in favor? Opposed? Motion carries. 8.1.4, letter from City of Parksville, supports for update or replacement of a provincial emergency notification system, PENS.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Basically, you've sort of summarized it. That's all that this is that the City of Parksville would just like to improve, or have the provincial government improve and update the provincial emergency notification system, so that they can quickly alert users to tidal wave warnings. I know tidal wave isn't the right word, but I can't pronounce the other word because I always say two Sammys and my daughter makes fun of me. So I can't say it. So basically, there was a motion that Colwood City Council support the City of Parksville in their campaign to have the provincial government update or replace the provincial emergency notification system, and a letter of support be sent to the Union of British Columbia Municipalities, and I will so move it.
Second.
There's a tie. Take a pick. Comments, questions? Seeing none, call the question. All those in favor? Opposed? Motion carried. Moving then on to 8.2, Parks, Recreation and Culture regarding Colwood Creek Park, and recommendation 8.2.1. Councillor Day?
Thank you. So we had a report regarding Colwood Creek Park. We had received a complaint from a resident regarding dogs being off-leash at the Colwood Creek Park in the area of the playground for children. And there were several options laid out in the report, including designating the whole park as an on-leash park, or designating half of it as on-leash and half of it as off-leash, installing a chain-link fence around the playground, installing a gate across the bridge to separate the two on- and off-leash areas. We had a couple of members of the public attended the meeting and gave us some feedback on both the pro-dog side of the park and also on the nobody was really anti anything, just that some people have children who are afraid of dogs, and people and definitely our parks crews have noted there's definitely a problem with dog feces in the playground area. And there are a lot of daycares that use the park, possibly 2 or 3 daycares per day visiting that playground area. So it was recommended, and I would so move, that staff bring forward a bylaw amendment to the City of Colwood's Animal Regulation and Impounding Bylaw 1990 to designate the playground area in Colwood Creek as a dog on-leash area for a 1-year trial period. That we direct staff to create a simple low fence around the playground area in Colwood Creek Park to create a dog on-leash zone with costs to come from the park's budget when funding is available. Signage to be erected to inform the community about the change in the park, and that staff be directed to bring this item back to the committee after a 1-year trial for review. I don't think I mentioned it, but the discussion was around using the split rail fencing, which is similar to what we have in other areas of our parks and places where we have a drop-off close to a path. It's a very affordable way to put an aesthetically pleasing, natural-looking fence in the area.
Council questions, comments? Councillor Martin?
I understand the gist of this, and I understand why the recommendation is there. I'm not going to be supporting it. I'm actually quite proud of the fact that Colwood doesn't have a leash law, and I do understand that this is only for the playground area and that, but I also believe that it's kind of a slippery slope as we start getting more and more into to leashing dogs and expecting that. And I think I like the fact that we need to keep our dogs under control, and there needs to be that aspect. But I'm not actually supportive of it, so I won't be voting in favor.
Councillor Logan and then Lukens.
Thank you, Worship. I am actually in favor of this as a neighbor of the park and a frequent user of that playground with my 3 kids. So I understand what the issues are in that area. And Colwood Creek Park, of all the parks in Colwood, is probably the heaviest used park for dogs, and it's a lovely park that your dogs can run and play. I guess my only concern is the type of fence, and because really the trail is so close to the park itself or to the playground itself that I highly doubt. I suspect that people would be, go down and grab their dog and leash it just so they can walk another 50 feet past the park, let it go. I think there has to be a fence that's an actual barrier, as opposed to something that could be hopped over. Just thinking realistically, notwithstanding that it's cheap and it looks good, but I'm not sure how effective a split rail fence would be.
Answering Councillor Logan's.
Yeah, just we did have a chat with the parks foreman about possibly making it 1 rail taller than most of our split rail fences are, and it would be that whole corner of the park, so that the area that has the playground plus a bit of grassy area that would be dogs on leash only. So it would make it less, it would actually be less expensive to fence off the whole corner, because there's less fence required than to fence all the way around the little playground only. So that whole little corner is kind of a natural boundary between the path and the creek.
Councillor Lukens?
Thank you. As a responsible dog owner, I always pick up after my dog. Not looking at anyone in particular. But whether they're on leash or off leash, if they do their business and you don't have a responsible owner, the result is the same. As far as the fence goes from separating, I guess, do we really expect that people that don't want to dog their leash or leash their dog are actually going to comply? And here it says item number 2, to create a simple low fence when funding is available. Well, I think that most of the funding we have in our budgets is pretty tight as it is. So although you say a 1-year trial, when funding is available, it could be a year down the road before it even starts. I'm just asking the question. I don't know if there's money available, so hence a question. But I I think it's education. You know, put signage up. You're going to get the same sort of enforcement with signage as opposed to going to the expense of and time to put up a fence, etc. Because I truly feel that the result's going to be the same. I walk the beach every day, and there's dogs that look fine, that are aggressive, that are off leash, and you turn and look like, why the heck is that dog off leash? Like, hello. But people just are not responsible, unfortunately, and it doesn't matter what we try and do. And I just am concerned about the cost and the time that you know, parks are going to put, or Public Works is going to put into this, and then our bylaw officers to get the same result.
Councillor Day?
So just first of all, I think that we were relatively sure, at least at the Parks Committee, in discussion with the Parks foreman, that we could come up with the split rail fencing relatively soon as work schedules permit, that they do keep an amount of split rail fencing on hand, so he felt that that was within reason to come up with a time frame, and I don't have specifics on that. And as far as the enforcement is concerned, because we contract through the CRD for our enforcement for the dogs on leash bylaw, and well, everything, picking up after your dog is, we can certainly request increased patrols, and Bylaw did happen to be in attendance at the meeting as well, and indicated that they would definitely step up enforcement in the beginning to ensure that we had a good start with compliance, so that, because it is a change and we're initiating a change in the way that that portion of the park is being used, we didn't want to close that area off from dogs, and so we felt that with dogs on a leash it would address that issue of, you know, children who are not comfortable. You know, maybe it's a very friendly dog, but if it runs up to, you know, and it's just as big as you are, it can be quite frightening. So it was that type of thing that we were trying to address. We were trying to give children a safe place where they could feel that they could play without any fear.
Councillor Sullivan, pardon me.
Thank you, through the chair. I will be supporting this. I think it's important that we keep our children safe and away from any potential hazards, including irresponsible dog owners. I have a question, though, with respect, as a follow-up to what Councillor Lukens has said with respect to item number 2 and when funding is available. Would it be more accurate to say when staff time permits as opposed to when funding is available?
I
Have
believe
you got any words of wisdom on that one?
I believe that we just didn't know specifically, quantifiably, where their budgets were at, how many, you know, we haven't done an exact estimate in terms of how much split rail fencing it would take, and we were, we didn't have an exact estimate. So rather than put a timeline on it, we also didn't want to suggest that we would create a budgetary burden that was beyond what we have already approved in this year's budget. So we wanted to work within the existing budget, and we wanted to work with the existing staff. So I'm pretty sure that it was staff wanted to get on with getting this initiated as soon as possible, because they saw it as a real benefit to staff time in terms of less time cleaning up the playground too.
Councillor Sullivan?
Thank you. Just as a follow-up, I'm still confused then when we're using words like when funding is available and council doesn't know how much funding we're talking about, whether or not we've actually got the split rail in stock or not, and how much it's going to take. So it's just, I mean, I'm uncomfortable voting in favor of, you know, a motion that is this unclear.
Do we have any other information on that? I know we don't have anybody from Parks here.
The only quote we had was for a chain link fence. So the information that I had at the meeting was that we kept an amount of split rail fence in stock, but because they hadn't actually measured it out and done a proper estimate, I'm certainly happy to defer this and bring it back with more information, if that would be more comfortable.
I would certainly appreciate that.
So we have a motion on the table. James?
Through the chair, I would also question staff, to look at what has been approved, and if we do have that available in stock, what was the intent of that? To replace other broken fences, or was there another project perhaps that is now not going to be carried out into this fiscal year? So again, I think staff need to come forward with some clear direction as to what this inventory's intent was for. If it was just replacement stock, yes, we could probably use that, but then we're going to have to replace that in alternate years.
So the motion on the table is what's recommended here before us. Do we vote it possibly down and then look for a motion to defer, or can we do that?
A motion to refer is always in order, Madam Chair.
Okay.
So I would move that we refer this back to staff for more information, and I'll be looking for a seconder.
Second.
Call the question. All those in favor? Unanimous.
Thank you.
What, you wanted to be the only one?
I wanted to be on record that I voted for unsafe children. Nice comment, buddy.
We do have a leash law in place.
All right. Item 8.3, Planning and Land Use Committee Development Variance Permit DVP 0114 for a number of addresses on Hopwood and 3439 Resolution Way. Councillor Lukens.
Thank you, Your Worship. The variance was requested to facilitate the construction of 5 one-story family dwellings, which would exceed the maximum allowable floor area ratio requirement. It was a pretty short discussion. Based on the slope of the land, it only made sense that this would be supported. There was no objection from anyone in the audience, and it was recommended to Council, and I so move that the DVP number 0114 be authorized for issuance, which would have the effect of varying the maximum allowable floor area ratio pursuant to Section 5.6.054 of the Land Use Bylaw number 151 from 0.4 to 0.5 on the properties described as strata lots 19, 20, 22, 23, and 27, Section 63, Esquimalt District Strata Plan VIS 7142, blah, 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 subject to the following condition. The additional floor area permitted by the issuance of DVP 0114 shall be located within a basement floor, which shall have a geodetic elevation lower than the lowest curb elevation fronting the property. And if you have a question, I'll defer that to Ian.
Seconder, please. Conversation, questions, Councillor Martin? Yep, we do. Yep, we do. Nope. Councillor Day?
Trying to second it.
Thank you. I just, I was having a look at the drawings for this one and noted that it says in the report that these are one-family dwellings, but it's very clear on the drawings that were included in the planning and zoning agenda that there is a proposed suite in each one of those homes, and they're very, very large homes, like 3,600 square foot homes. Given that they're not incredibly small lots, but they are smaller lots with very large houses on them, and they have a suite definitely planned for them. I just wonder how that affects the next subdivision that we look at, what the precedent is.
Through the chair, if I could just clarify, you're concerned about there being impacts because of this?
Yeah, very, very large houses on small lots with suites, and you know, we voted on a lot of things in the past where we've been pretty careful about not approving you know, gigantic houses, because they tend not to be just one occupant. Over time, they tend to get broken down into smaller and smaller suites.
Through the chair, if I could just speak to the issue of the report referring to these units as single family. That is terminology, for better or for worse, that we use to differentiate between single family and duplex units. The land use bylaw doesn't define secondary suites as additional density. So potentially there's a bit of confusion there, but this neighborhood would be allowed to have suites in all of the houses there. In this case, the planning department felt that the impact of a larger house, if it was accommodated within the basement floor, would not have major aesthetic impacts to the street, nor have a significant impact in terms of potential density issues with the suite.
And if I could just follow up, is there also, because you've said that the floor has to be below grade at the road level, but it doesn't say how far below it has to be. Is there a height limit on the homes as well?
Through the chair, yes, there is. I believe in the R5 zone it's 8.5 meters. But in this case, the lots are basically sloping downwards so that the overall height wouldn't be increased.
Any other questions? James?
Through the chair to Councillor Day, I believe also during the PLU meeting discussion, there was the commitment by the developer to provide 3 off-street parking stalls in lieu of the garage parking for each of those properties as well, so that there wouldn't be an issue of on-street parking as a result of having these secondary suites.
Any others? Call the question then. All those in favor? Opposed? Motion carried. 8.3.2, zoning application RZ0313, Seafield and Heatherbell Roads.
Thank you, Your Worship. This is a development down in the lagoon area. It's proposed to create 35 lots ranging from 336 meters square to 380. The amenity contributions that the developer would be making, as well as a park dedication and a landscape plan. He'd also be replacing or moving Seafield Road and creating a new road that would go through the development, which was quite well received by those in the audience. There was about 60 audience participants. Several of them did speak. There was only one that did speak opposed to it at the meeting. However, I know some others were not comfortable in speaking, but they had opposition due to the density, and we did talk about that at the meeting. If you had an opportunity to read the report, it was included in there. It was very apparent, based on some of the feedback, that the developer did do a good job of engaging the community and getting the information out, and did a detailed folio, as you have before you, as to what the streetscape, et cetera, is going to look like. The city engineer was at the meeting. There was concerns about how wide the road was going to be, and in order to be able to get 2 larger size vehicles through, it was confirmed that the road would be a minimum of 6 meters wide plus parking extra to that. So it would be 6 meters plus whatever the allocation is for parking. So we'd be able to get the fire trucks, et cetera, through. There was questions around the impact of the tsunami zone, and we did refer to the CRD presentation that we had within the last 6 months about what that looked like. Blind spots, landscaping, sidewalks, all of those things were talked about, and I think it was quite an inclusive meeting. The recommendation to Council, and I so move, that a zoning amendment bylaw including provisions for the required contributions to the Community Amenity Fund in the amount of $2,500 per dwelling unit in excess of 2, a contribution to the Public Art Fund in the amount of $500 per dwelling in excess of 2, be prepared such that if and when provisions are made in a registrable development agreement for the following conditions, consideration will be given to the adoption of the amendment bylaw. Drainage, the energy efficiency, form and character, frontage improvements. I'll speak a little bit about that. Initially, there was a plan via the planning department that it would be, and I won't say this right, only Ian can say it right, the Vernoff. There was concerns that it was only going to be one way, and staff quickly realized that that was not going to be accepted within the community, and therefore this street going through this community will be a two-way street. It will be of asphalt and some paving stones, so it'll be broken up a little bit. Let's see. Fire safety is also part of the recommendation, and then of course the archaeological concerns that the owner shall ensure prior to any land altering activities that this is addressed and reported back to the Director of Planning to our satisfaction.
Second.
Thank you. Comments, questions? Councillor Martin?
Thank you. I have several points that I'd just like to. The first is at the meeting, and I'll ask it through the mayor to our planner. Make sure he's listening. Okay, he is. During the presentation, there was a comment made by the developer, or the proposed developer, that he would be building a sidewalk from Portsmouth, where Portsmouth sidewalk ends, to the new entrance of Ocean Grove. And I wanted to clarify if you checked into that and if that's accurate, or if it was meant that it would just be going up to Seafield.
Through the chair, yes, I did follow up with the applicant, and that is his intention, as he stated. That pledge hasn't been incorporated into the recommendation at this point. That in good faith we'll work with the applicant to incorporate that prior to public hearing.
Okay, thank you. I personally, I think it's nice from a democracy standpoint that, you know, sometimes you may have personal feelings, but I think I heard very clearly at the meeting that the neighborhood was supportive of it. And so I will be supporting this this evening. I am concerned, though, and I will put this, and I've mentioned this to planning before, I think as we begin to develop both this development plus Ocean Grove, and we begin to grow the population there, Heatherbell needs to be a safe road to move young people to the elementary school. And if we do not have a sidewalk on Heatherbell, that becomes very much a concern. Heatherbell is getting worse and worse with fast traffic going down to well, that's me, but it also is going down to the Coast Collective. I almost got hit, and the guy was doing like 70 coming down that road. So it's getting worse and worse and worse as the traffic increases. I'm also worried, just putting that out there too, as we grow this area, I think more traffic will begin to divert themselves down Portsmouth to get, for example, to Matilda and that. And Portsmouth is a road that is starting to deteriorate as it is right now. And I'm concerned as we begin to grow that out, that both Heatherbell and Portsmouth, the roads will see some additional stresses, and that hopefully we as a city are taking that into account. Thank you.
Councillor Lucan?
Yes, Madam Mayor, just a couple of thoughts or follow-ups. It was made very clear by staff, because this was a concern of some audience members, about Seafield remaining open while the construction of this road was done, and it was confirmed that Seafield would not be closed off and access to Ocean Grove would not be changed until such time there was a complete access to Ocean Grove via the Ocean Grove development. It was also expressed, and it's not just Councillor Martin, about the concerns of the speed and the access, and for not only cars but pedestrians, cyclists, etc., on Heatherbell. And there was an ask of whether or not those improvements could be executed prior to the developments really getting underway, in order to improve the safety along that road for everybody, because it's going to be difficult with the construction going on if it's in tandem with both of those projects.
Staff answer?
So I didn't realize there was a question there, but
Not really. Well, I'm just wondering within, like, if the construction timeframe in there will be fairly extensive, would it not be an appropriate use of temporary construction zone speed limits and have signage in effect to indicate that, you know, and fairly highly profiled along that area, just because of the school route. It is an area that draws up to Sangster School, you know, considerably, so. Yeah. You know, I mean, we have two of the mobile highway signs, the lit ones that we could, you know, put in place to, you know, give some heads up warning and bigger, but then some other, and I mean, it will become obvious, at least in the daytimes when the construction vehicles are moving around in there, which might limit it, but again, people walking dogs that come down through Royal Roads and out that other access way, you know, it could be a bit of a compromise with people, dogs, kids, and the like. I'm just trying to find ways that we have maybe within our own means to control some of that.
sure. Well, Madam Mayor, we could append Section 27 in the recommendation concerning construction nuisance mitigation. There are already clauses covering pedestrian safety, but we could beef those up a little bit. I'd maybe draw on the expertise of the chief engineer to maybe give us some wording.
If I may, I think there were a few other things in here, like the may in providing traffic calming was going to become shall. So there are a few little tweaks needed to the wording, including the length of the sidewalk, and I think we can promise to do that by public hearing.
Is council satisfied with
Sorry.
the promise on staff's behalf to take care of these minor reflections, or do we want something more formal and in case would, Ian?
If I could just massage what Mr. Baxter stated, council may wish to consider directing staff to explore options for improving pedestrian safety during the construction period with the developer and reporting back to council prior to public hearing.
So that would be in addition to what we have before us, an added bullet? So not to slow anything up or whatever, right? That's my intent. If this, I didn't see a timeline on here, but I'm sure that the proponent is eager to continue their negotiations and planning on this project.
Staff, we wouldn't expect that that would slow us down at all. It could be reported to council at first or second reading. Yeah.
Okay. So with the addition at that point, Councillor Dave?
I just had a question in regards to the street trees. Has there been a calculation as far as soil volume for these street trees?
Through the chair, we've done extensive work with local arborists. I actually contacted the governing professional body for arborists to try to get a handle on how much soil we should be asking for. I believe the report specifies a minimum of 16 cubic meters, and that's based on, for larger trees, that's based on some research that's been produced. To achieve full canopy coverage, you need those types of soil volumes for the typical types of trees that we plant in this area.
And just on the trees, I didn't notice any limitations in terms of native species. Is there none?
Through the development permit process, we would work with the developer to try to identify native species. There are guidelines covering that. A lot of the trees that we see planted are hybrids that have potentially a native species hybridized with another species. Yeah.
Thank you. Not really any questions, more of a comment to say I will be supporting this application. I'm very happy to see it come forward. Much as I love blackberries, I think this is going to look a whole lot nicer than the blackberry patch that we've got down there. And I also like the fact that it brings a bit more diversity of housing down to the lagoon area, so different opportunities for different income brackets. I also attended the Planning and Land Use Committee meeting, and I was quite impressed at the public input. I thought it was very sophisticated in terms of the kind of comments coming back, particularly since we'd kind of heard rumours that there were a number of people who weren't too happy to see it down there, and so I thought people gave very thoughtful comments, and that was good. And I also think both through this and the Ocean Grove development, we might finally have some opportunities to address some of the issues on Heatherbell, and absolutely, yeah, we've been hearing from public down there that's a concern. So starting to get the sidewalks in, starting to have the potential to do, whatever form of traffic calming, and ironically, the kind of the increased amount of traffic that we'll get down there will actually slow the traffic down as well. So that will be a side benefit. So no, I'm happy to see this go ahead, and I will be supporting it. Perhaps my only kind of slightly negative comment that I would make, and somebody in the public noted this as well, is sort of, as much as we can, how do we get away from this kind of real kind of cookie cutter of this kind of row of houses all looking identical, and I see that the developer is sort of trying to do that through the use of colours and different roof lines and stuff like that. So I think something that just kind of, breaks it up a little bit is all great. But no, I'm happy to see this.
I think the objective was to make it kind of like the Pink Ladies in San Fran, et cetera, kind of unique and funky like that. So, yeah, you'll like that, Gordy.
And it has a playground. Any other comments, questions?
Yeah, just one other thing, that the developer was very willing to work with neighbors and that sort of thing to accommodate their needs as well. So I think it's a win-win for the community, and a great transition from the, condos and that sort of thing to the bigger lots to, cottage style. So I think it'll be a nice addition, and I think we've got added value in our community with this developer.
Definitely provides some diversity and choice. That's good. Call the question then. All those in favor? Opposed? Motion carried. Now I have to just double check my agenda, and I hope that we've been kept on track. I think we're done, folks, with that, because the next one was bylaws, which we already covered off the top. Yeah, so motion to move in camera? All those in favor? Opposed? Motion carried? Yep. Folks, thank you very much.
I'm glad you caught that I hate kids. I'm glad you caught that I hate kids. I
Kind of
believe in child
interesting.
safety, so
I'm gonna set
I'm
that
going
up
to be
there.
supporting this.
Take a better look at it later. Was there anybody's interest in doing the Belmont School Wizard of Oz? April 3rd, 4th, or 5th. You can take a choice in there.
I'll make sure that doesn't go in the minutes.
The opening performance has a gala reception, but Friday and Saturday is also available. Would you like to? I'll let Melissa know, but I'll give you this. So if you could let me know what date, and then that works out best for you, and then just shoot me an email, and then I'll fire it back to her. I talked to her today on it, and I said to her I'd be checking with council tonight. Oh, it's great. I've done a number of them and whatever. It's awesome.